grab a few more from the closet. All right. Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. My name is Roya Anir-Soleimani, and I'm the Community Engagement and Public Programs Manager with PICA, Portland Institute for Contemporary Art. I think most of you have been here before, but if not, welcome to our space. Quickly, before I dive into Darren and the lecture tonight, I just want to let you know that an announcement went out a few days ago, but we do have an exhibition opening on Sunday, the 21st, here in this space. It's part of our visual art program, curated by Christine Kennedy and an LA-based, formerly Portland-based artist named Rob Halverson. And that will be happening from 2 to 6, so it's an afternoon affair. So if you can make it, it's free, it's open to the public, and the exhibition will be up through April 1st. So hope to see you there. We're thrilled to welcome Darren O'Donnell back to Portland. His company, Mammalian Reflex, based in Toronto, has presented 2 projects with PICA and TBA in the past. Haircuts by Children in 2007, and All the Sex I've Ever Had in 2014. This visit is a bit different. Darren is with us for a year-long residency, but it's a more creative and research than artistic residency, and it's generously supported by a grant from the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation. We'll be working with Darren, PICA and Darren together will be working to explore some possible models and strategies for more innovative or creative youth engagement, and specifically teen engagement, and specifically thinking about teenagers who might not already have inroads or access to the contemporary art world as we might think of it. So Darren's going to be embedded in PICA and in Portland throughout the next year. May and September will be his next 2 of 3 site visits. And he'll be continuing to get a sense of the local youth arts landscape. He'll be building connections with partner organizations, interacting with young people. He's already been doing some of that on the ground here, and we're pleased to see how that all unfolds over the course of the next several months. So you may be asking, why Darren? Although if you've seen his work before, you're probably not asking that question. So why are we working with Darren on this kind of initiative and this sort of exploratory project? So if you did participate in Haircuts by Children, whether in Portland or elsewhere, or if you've seen All the Sex, then you might agree with me that his methods for collaborating with communities and with participants and with audiences and with young people and with old people are probably radical, actually. We're lucky to have him with us and to help us think through these big questions around arts engagement and what we might call the next generation of artists, audiences, and even cultural administrators. So this exploration year is just the start of PICA's commitment to expanding and diversifying who's making, producing, presenting, and curating contemporary culture, and making space for the relationships and the mentorships that support that vision. Darren is an artist, writer, actor, and city planner. He's the director and founder of Mammalian Reflex and the author of Social Acupuncture, a manifesto calling for a more socially and politically profound art and theater. His art is often described through the lens of relational aesthetics. O'Donnell is the artistic and research director of Mammalian Reflex, which presented during, as I mentioned, projects during TBA in 2007 and 14. And they call Mammalian Reflex a research art atelier that produces performances, community-based events, and theoretical texts. The organization fosters dialogue and audience participation and creates activist performance described by the group as ideal entertainment for the end of the world. Its programs work to dissolve boundaries between art and life in an attempt to create an aesthetic of civic engagement. So without further ado, Darren, thanks.
Thanks, Roya. So yeah, thanks, Roya, and thanks to PICA for having me here and doing it. And this is a great, interesting opportunity and a first time I've ever done something like this, what we're doing here for the course of the year. So it's still early days and I've just been meeting people, so I don't really have much to say about that. But what I do first have to start out with is just one of the sponsors for tonight's talk is I have a bracelet sponsor. It's Lucy Governor over there. Give it up for Lucy! So Lucy runs BFF bracelets. Did I get that right? BFF bracelets. And if you want to order yourself some bracelets or get a bracelet made, according to whatever colors, themes that you choose. I got that to match my tattoos there. Those are to remind me to write every day and to work out to make sure that I'm in good physical shape. So thank you very much, Lucy. So, and get your own bracelet at the end.
And she makes great homemade butter.
Yeah. You make homemade butter too? Yeah. Okay, if you want a bracelet dipped in homemade butter, Lucy is the one you talk to. So I'm going to assume that mostly people here are, let's say, cultural sector practitioners-ish. Yeah, that are cultural sector-y, sort of artists, education things, architects, sort of things like that. I think that's kind of a lot of the audience or people kind of in and around that. So I'm going to give you the talk. I'm going to focus on sort of the company as a whole and what we're doing internationally, and then some of the thinking behind it, and then just like start off with a real clear look under the hood of the organization, because that often comes up. People ask that. So I'll just introduce you to sort of, this is the kind of main team. This is Jenna Winter, and over there, this one, it's Eva Verite, and the three of us are the three co-directors of the company. We report directly to a board. We're not-for-profit for charitable status in Toronto, and these are a bunch of young people we've been working with since they were 9 years old, and they're turning 20 this year, and that's a succession plan. We want them to take over the organization, and that seems to be happening to a certain degree, and I'll talk more about that later. So that's who the core of the company is, and this, often people ask this, I'm supplying this just because in case you're curious. We're guaranteed funding from the Canada Council, from the Ontario Arts Council, the Toronto Arts Council, so we have this public funding that's guaranteed, that works out to this amount when we have other kinds of one-off grants that year. It's a while back, but that year we had that, and then we get a little bit from foundations. Most of what we get is from earned when we go out on the road and present work. So that breaks it down there. So you can see government funding is pretty big, but compared to some organizations in Canada, that's not big. Fees, that's substantial if you compare us to other organizations that are similar. We're shitty at raising donations, as you can see. Oh well. And then that's how much I make. So, and that I used to make, that used to be the same up until maybe a year ago when the Canadian dollar started to dive. So people often are curious about that and don't want to, can't ask that because it's a bit awkward, but that's the company. So we're not a massive company, but we're okay, and we have this solid kind of base support that we get from the Canadian government, and those are all peer review juries. So those are all people in the field who are taking a look at our grants and deciding, and it goes in 5 or 3 year cycles, and I'm about to write another 3-year cycle. So I'll just talk a little bit about the kind of thinking behind some of what the company's up to. I just want to also mention that all of this stuff that I'll be talking about, especially the theoretical stuff off the top, is all provisional. It's all sort of like, maybe at this moment this is what we believe, but we may not believe it for much longer, or maybe we'll continue to believe it, who knows. But we consider social relations as the primary material. If you're a painter, obviously paint is your primary material. Social relations are primary material. We use the term social specific art. In theater, there's a big thing around site specificity. And we are saying, no, we're not site specific, we're social specific. It's all about who is there. The first question always has to be who, and hopefully there are 2 who's, and the artist can be one of these who's. And when I say who's, that's just the idea of concentrating on a who is to define exactly who we're working with, because sometimes in some social practice related work, it can get quite general. Like who can be the question of the general public, and we're big on trying to refine that so it's very specific, and so that we're always like, so if we're thinking about working with young people, then how specific can we make that? Can we make that a specific demographic of young people who are, and we prefer to work with young people who are in more marginalized populations, and then also people who, if they themselves are not immigrants and their parents are immigrants, that's another favorite who of ours to work with. So we try to keep that as defined as possible, and if we can bring in more than one set of who's and create sort of collisions between those different groups, then that becomes even better. So always looking for that. we call, I mean, it's just this bullshit name that I made up just to sell a book. It's called, like, the method of social acupuncture, whatever. It's just a stupid thing. I'm so embarrassed that I did that. But, so the company's method of social acupuncture, but whatever. It's not, it's just a name. But we do think about things in terms of yin-yang theory, which is just thinking about things in terms of excess and deficiency. Where is there an excess of resources? Where is there a deficiency? It's an obvious one. The festival has lots of resources. The kids at the school over there in whatever east in Jade or in someplace in eastern part of the city, they may not have those resources. So can we move those resources over there? We have two assumptions with all of the work. We assume that people are always generous if given the right conditions to be generous. But that's a kind of auto state. That's a default state that we believe people are in given the right circumstances. And that there's abundance there. There's lots to go around. It's just a matter of distribution. Also, the idea that social contradictions can operate as batteries. If you think about a battery is just a place where there's more energy than the area that's surrounding it. So the model plane that you have with the propellers, there's not very much energy in the propellers. The battery has all the energy in it, and you facilitate a power gradient. In the same way, our projects are take advantage of contradictions where there's a bunch of resources in this festival, not so many resources over there, and then we use this power gradient to power our project. So thinking about contradictions in as positive a way as you can to think about a shitty contradiction like that. Also the idea of performativity. Often that's a word that gets misused in the performance world as a synonym for performance. What we mean by that is more that the idea that it comes from performative speech act, which is the idea that it's a performative speech act is a speech act that makes something happen in the real world. So the classic example is, I now pronounce you husband and husband, or wife and wife, or husband and wife. That suddenly, when you hear those words, you and the person that you're hearing that with suddenly have a different relationship to the tax person. You have a different relationship when you're standing at the border. You guys can go up together. On airplanes, you can fill out that form together. So really material things happen when those words are said. In the same way, a project like Haircuts by Children, rather than being about children's rights, we try to instantiate for that moment actually young people having more rights than they would ordinarily. So they have hopefully a full set of rights during one of the projects. So that comes into reality. So it's rather than about something, it is that for that moment. And then finally, trying to use social discomfort as an intentional stressor, which may sound strange, but we're always trying to increase social intelligence is sort of how we talk about it. And you can think about it in these, and this kind of makes it clear where if you're trying to build physical strength, a training stressor will be weight, muscle failure, exhaustion, that's what you want. You get big muscles, no pain, no gain. Intellectual, math problems are hard, your mind fails, you get confused, your brain gets bigger, no confusion, no clarity. Social, other people are the stressor. We know that we're succeeding when we feel awkward with other people, then we know that our muscles are getting bigger. And then no ops, no allies. So I'm glad you're laughing because all of this stuff, the thing about this stuff is that I'm kind of a little bit self-conscious about it. I've presented and had some artists kind of bristle at the kind of the rigidity of what I'm trying to do here with this kind of stuff. I do want to mention that this I consider part of the artwork of the company, although this may seem like it's this kind of rigid system for replicability, which it is. I'm considering that as part of the artwork, and it's a flexible thing, and for me it's more of a fun thing to think about this than any kind of rigid set of ways to work. So, which gets to the next part where this is sort of the theory of change that we bring to what we're doing, and this again is super provisional. So what is the work is sort of based on the idea that macro changes are due to an accumulation of micro level changes that leads to macro level changes, and that they're only interactions between individuals. That's all that exists in the world, is interactions between individuals. There's nothing else really that happens. All other, the idea of structure affecting say a systemic racism, obviously that's real. There's no doubt that that's real, except that the only way that plays out, the only way that can become real in the world is through just individual interactions, and most of those interactions are in like 2-person units. It's usually as big as they get unless you're at a demo or a Justin Bieber concert. Usually things are pretty small and intimate throughout, all time, every time. And like even the idea of the systemic racism, a cop killing a black kid. I mean, that has to happen. That has to happen between 2 people generally. So there's this systemic situation that you have to take a look at, but it only really, things only happen at that level. So the term for that comes out as analytic sociology. I'm almost done with this shit, so don't worry. We get into projects in a second. Comes out of analytic sociology, and it's called structural individualism. All social facts, their structure and change are in principle explicable in terms of individuals, their properties, actions, and relations to one another. Macro level properties of a collectivity are not definable for single micro level entities. So you can't talk about inequity according to just a single person. Inequity you have to have at least 2 people to talk about inequities. There has to be a relationship happening there. Same as segregation. Other macro level concepts like that only come alive in individual relationships. So I'll leave all that crap behind now, except to say that it's always the individual relationships that we're looking at with the projects that we're doing. So now I'll just head into the work itself. That's Virginia Antoni Pillai, who I'll introduce in a bit. So the Heidelberg Protocol is a project that we're doing in Germany. We're working with the metropolitan region of Rhine-Neckar, which is an office that is the kind of office that would normally make a brochure publicizing all of the cool ballet and paintings that are being hung at this fancy gallery up in this small German town. That's the kind of role they would normally be playing. What these guys are doing is bringing in artists and dropping them into these kind of remote communities in the area around Mannheim and Heidelberg. And our partner here is the mayor's office. And what we're doing is we're working with a bunch of guys who live in Louisenhof, and they're all relatively recent refugees. Most of the guys that we're working with are from Gambia. So we have there's about 20 of them, but then the whole place is filled with 100 people, some from the Balkans, nobody from any war-torn places, nobody from Syria in that particular group, which makes it kind of dicey to work with them because they could get shipped back at any second. But we understand that they're probably not. So there's a couple of the guys there, and these are some German guys who are taking out bowling. Those are the evangelical Christians who are very helpful and always around, hanging around. And so what we're doing is and almost spying on us. That's what it felt like. They were asking all these questions once, and we're just really like a little bride, I have to say. So what we're doing is I spent a month living with them, and I brought with me one of my associates who's 19 at the time. He's a Canadian kid who was born in Nepal. He's a Tibetan refugee, and so he came with me, and we hung out with these guys just to spend a month of doing sort of research to figure out what could we possibly do for a larger project. And so what we decided to do is I go back right after this, pretty much in March, and we'll spend 7 months working with these Gambian refugees, trying to figure out for each of them 1 or 2 things that they would like to help them become German, to help them just get on with the process of becoming German. If that's speaking German, if that's a German wife, learning how to ride a motorbike, skiing, whatever they want that will help them and so that they can feel that they're becoming more German. We're going to do that with about 10 of them, and then document the shit out of it, and then make a presentation that will be a stage-based presentation where we present our findings, and it'll be fun and it'll be theatrical, and then hopefully pass the responsibility of this show onto them, where they can hopefully take it to some degree and tour it around the rest of the country, and have turned themselves into experts of the integration process. So using themselves as a research site, we do all of this stuff, and then they have this presentation that they can hopefully make some money from, and we can cannibalize it so it doesn't necessarily have to be a performance with fancy lights and sound. We can just do it as a panel discussion, or they can appear solo on a panel discussion with this information. So try to cannibalize it, so we break it down so they have a little bit of employment, because that's one of the kind of big challenges for these guys. So the month of fun that I had there of just doing research, I knocked on every door in this town. It's a town of 10,000. I knocked on every door of every business person and introduced myself in the project, and spent a bunch of time with these guys, and it culminated in a cooking contest between teams that were comprised of Germans and also from refugees, and they all had ingredients from all of the different countries that were not identified, so they had to sort out what this big root from Africa was, what is this jar of weird pickles from the Ukraine. And so they had to sort of all sort that out. And it was just kind of a fun way to end the research period. This is the, and we treated it like a show. We interviewed everybody as they were cooking. There's the mayor there. And the interesting thing about this is that even all the refugee guys, everybody said that there was no way that these dishes are going to taste any good. We can't bring like food from Africa and from Macedonia and Germany, put that all together and make something good. All the refugees said, no, that's going to taste like shit. All of the Germans said that they were convinced that there's no way that was going to work. But they did a really good job. So can you kill these, do you think, the pig ones? They did a really amazing job, all of the teams, and actually made something that tasted really good. And then there's a Michelin star restaurant in the town that's willing to put that on the menu, and they're going to put that on the menu. That's one of the things we have to sort out. Okay, there. So you get some serious plating action going on there. It's really surprised me. And there's some winners. I don't know which ones. There's some more high fives. So we're doing kind of stuff like that is really geared toward there's like an urban planning, cultural planning aspect to that kind of stuff, and then there's stage-based stuff. This is one that we've been touring around for some time. I think just Jackie is here, who is in it. This is Jackie Anderson, the star of all of this. What's that? These are old, yeah. Well, that's the direction we're all heading. And the DJ, yeah. I'm going to call you Broken Windows, but what do you? I know David, but yeah, just DJ, David. Okay, what's your last name? I'm such an asshole. Chandler, right. Yeah. So David Chandler, yeah, he goes by. He's popping up on the Google chat always as Broken Windows. So these guys were part of this show that we did here as TBA. And the way this works is we interview a bunch of people who are seniors, and this is a Singapore version where they wanted us to stick strictly with women for a bunch of reasons. Women were the only people in the audience, and women were the only people on the crew other than me and the co-director Constantine. So what we do is we interview each person for 4 hours. We go through each single year of their life, and we ask them about all the sex that they've ever had, everything that they can remember from the first hand that they might have held to the last time they took Viagra, and everything in between, and really detailed questions about the quality of the orgasm that they had, whatever was it a nice penis, was it a circumcised penis, whatever, everything that we could think of, and then we turn that into so we'll take. That was 10, so we had, like 40 hours worth of audio that we then transcribe into an hour and a half. And then the show itself is fairly simple. They're looking at their lines separately. Everybody has full veto power. Nothing goes public that they are not comfortable with. Then we stick them in front of an audience, try to make it as kind of beautiful as possible, and a sort of just a really I don't know how to describe it. We really pay a lot of attention to the environment. We're getting better at it. I'll show you a slide of something that really encapsulates it. Put them and give them gooseneck microphones and treat them like a panel of elder experts. And then this person, it's difficult to see, is the sound designer who David was. And then he, in this case, just called out year after year. And then we go through each year of their life and hear these different stories. And then we would poll the audience also in terms of things that related to, so if they had a story about having sex outdoors, then we would ask the audience how many people here have had sex outdoors. David would add that up and he'd make an announcement, 30 people here who have had sex outdoors. And then we jump on the person with microphones and facilitate a conversation between them and the seniors and the whole audience. And we do that so we ramp up the questions. We start with an easy one, like sex outdoors, to more and more difficult ones. Who here has an open relationship that wants to talk publicly about it? Who is here has had a lover steal something very valuable from them? Things like that. I'm going to skip this one because it's not that exciting. So then we do a bunch of work with young people, and this we did in 2007 here. And it's a very basic project. Work with a bunch of kids, get them trained as hairstylists. Then we put them to work in a salon and we pay them at least minimum wage to distribute haircuts. And they run the whole salon. So very basic project. With this one, we start with at least a couple of hours of talking and situating it within art so they understand how it's art. We show a bunch of slides of other people's projects like Santiago Sierra or Francis Elise. We show them how this fits into the performance world. And then we also do a whole exercise where we talk about children's rights and get them to list a whole list of all the things they cannot do because they are children. And then they have a debate about which ones are fair and which ones are not fair. So driving, they like to talk about that. Voting, sometimes if they're a little bit older, they want to talk about the fact they're not allowed to have sex, and then we'll have a debate about whether that's fair or not. And then we set them Unloosen Heads. Can you see that very well? No, it's really dim, but it's really, it's quite, you can see the scalp through here. There's a really good one that's super clear. This one is from here. It's from Portland. So this guy, it's just around near Wyden Kennedy. There's I don't know if they're still there, the salon. But so that guy's, his name's Hugh, and he's getting his name carved into the back of his head. So we're starting with an H. So, all right, yeah, we agree that, do we agree that's an H? Yeah, more or less? Yeah. Not sure what that is. So his girlfriend fell in love with him more when she saw that happen to him. The kids are really good at leaving a little bit of fluff down here. I love that. You can really, it's a classic kid haircut. So that's Ginny Dolker. She started with us in 2005 and 6, and now is a fashion designer. She just finished fashion college. Another thing that we do, and a lot of things that one sort of interesting aspect of the projects is even with something like All the Sex, because of the amount of time that we have to be on the ground. So with All the Sex, there's a recruitment process that the organization that are hosting it or presenting it, recruitment process that they have to do. They can sometimes start months ahead in order to find the right people for the project. And then we work with them quite intimately throughout the process because we're there the whole time. And we have a bunch of projects that are actually conceived to be interventions into the actual organization itself. So that's where the artistic, I think, impact in particular for this project and a few other ones is actually in the organizations that's hosting us, and we become part of their team a little bit because of the intricacy of the project. So with this one, it's called the Children's Choice Awards. And we organize a jury of kids to go and see every show in a festival like TBA. So it's a show that's directed at adults. It's contemporary work. Often it's really challenging work. It's even challenging work for adults. This is the Kunsten Festival des Arts in Brussels, which is one of the most challenging festivals. They had Toshiki Okada, people like that. Great artists, but sometimes they are to be with a bunch of kids and they're watching a bunch of people talk for 2 hours about how they're depressed is really funny, all in Japanese, while they're struggling with subtitles. So it's really, it's an interesting project because we sort of torture the kids with these kinds of shows, but they really have a good time and they really don't mind suffering through that because they have this whole experience. And the thing that's interesting is just the negotiation that we have to do with the festival to get this to happen, and what the negotiation that the festival has to do with the individual artists to have a bunch of 10-year-old kids sitting and watching a very serious art show. We have like Anna Teresa de Karasmaker, who's like the most fanciest choreographer, and she didn't let us have our red carpet outside because she thought it made the venue that she was performing in look tacky. So we weren't allowed to have a red carpet, so the kids didn't have their moment of glory. And also she forbid us, we ask, so the audience goes into the theater and then we hold back on the kids, and then when the young people go in, we ask for there to be an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the official festival jury. She didn't like that, and a lot of artists, some of them kind of don't love that. It's asking a lot. Like, it's their first moment, like suddenly their show is starting and then this other idiot artist show with stupid kids suddenly, so some people can resist that and we have to negotiate. And then we also ask that everybody, we do things like play on installations and stuff like that. And then we ask that all of the artists give a very special talk to just the kids and a Q&A for just the kids. So that's Robert Wilson, who's a fancy opera director. And so, like, everybody we ask, you have to, that's part of the deal. And really getting the festival on board so the festival doesn't make it an option for the artist is one of the really fun things that we're able to do oftentimes. And then we have an award ceremony where the microphone is only comfortable for the kids. And so you have to crouch down. And there's lots of singing and dancing. And then we give out awards that are trophies dipped in chocolate, and mixed with wax. Though mice will eat them. So we've had people say, hey, there's no chocolate on my statue anymore. What happened? You have mice, because the mice will just eat it completely clean. I was going to say, oh yeah, so the interesting thing about one other thing about this is, so we're torturing the kids a little bit with this one. Also, the audience that has to deal with suddenly all these kids running around the lobby and clicking. Once we gave them clicky pens, don't ever do that. If you ever do projects like this, clicky pens are a bad idea. And so, but the other thing that happens is that this negotiation often happens with the teachers. People who work with schools, or people, are there any teachers here? So I just don't piss people off. Teachers. No teachers? Teacher? Teacher? Okay, teacher. So teachers, we find, and you can contradict me, but it's really easy to threaten a teacher, especially if there's a teacher who's a cool teacher, and the students think that they're really cool. You can, because you're only there like an uncle or an aunt just visiting, hi, and you don't have all the rules and restrictions, you can kind of screw things up for them and be too fun and make life difficult for them. And so we've had some interesting negotiations. This one has just a funny story with it. There was one teacher in Brussels. She yanked the project because she claimed that the young people were not doing their homework, and so they were skipping their homework, so they were super tired. That couldn't have been true. We had just started the project, so there was something else up. There had been this one meeting with all of the kids, and a bunch of the kids were like Moroccan, ethnic Moroccan, though Belgian-born, African kids, and then this teacher, they came from the French school where they were a little middle class, and she looked uncomfortable with this situation. I don't know what was uncomfortable, but something was making her uncomfortable. So she yanked the project. So what we did was we offered it anyway. We said, well, we don't have to have the school. The bus can meet outside the school. The kids can get on. Like, we don't need the school to be part of it. So we phoned up the kids. We talked to the first parent and said, do you want to do this? And the parent said, well, are the other parents doing it? We said, absolutely, they're all doing it. And then so they said, okay, we're doing it. And then, halfway through, we weren't lying anymore, and everybody was doing it. And then the interesting thing was that the teacher started to then assign unprecedented amounts of homework to the kids. These are 10-year-old kids who are going, what the hell? She's never given us this much homework. And they figured it out. Like, she's mad at us. She's mad at us for continuing with the project. But the beautiful thing that happened in the end was only half beautiful. It could have been more beautiful. But was that we were doing in this presentation, the kids they do dances, they do songs, whatever they want. We do a bunch of kind of crazy stuff that they did throughout the course of the 7 weeks or whatever we're at the festival. But with this one, with the one I'm talking about, they wanted to do a dance, and that they had choreographed with the teacher. And one of the kids sort of put up her hand and said, no, let's not do that dance, because Mademoiselle so-and-so, she made that dance with us, and she doesn't like this project, and she probably wouldn't be happy if we were doing the dance in the project. And it was, to me, that just sort of really, really illustrated just how ethical kids can be and how considerate kids are. And in the situation where she's already taken a shot at them and made their life difficult, they had this compassion for her. And I just thought that just watching that just said a lot about children and what they understand about the world. This is a sister project. So there's a couple more projects, and then I'll just sort of finish with, and we can do a Q&A. Just finish with the more programmatic stuff that we're trying to do and reproduce in different spots. But I'll just finish, I think this is the last one. Eat the Street is a similar project to the Children's Choice Awards, only instead of going to shows, we're taking young people to restaurants. And they're checking out food that they've never seen before. She banned me from putting that on Facebook. She saw it on Facebook and was like, no way, get that off. So you didn't see it here. The thing with this project is, and with a lot of them, is the idea that we're bringing together young people and adults who would not ordinarily be spending time together, strangers, in other words. They hang out and have dinner together and get to know each other a little bit. And there's often this kind of vibe at first where the guy's obviously uncomfortable. A lot of people struggle with talking to young people. And so we have these very odd and uncomfortable dinners that start odd and uncomfortable. But it's not long before young people, as sort of social lubricants, are able to like get over it and start to like blurt out all the great things that young people say once they're comfortable, and it's not hard to make them feel comfortable after a little bit. So it's this interesting community dinner that happens. And that dynamic of the adult and the child, and how interesting it was, and how rare that is in like Canada, US, Australia, the UK, just how rare it is and how much paranoia there is around stranger danger. There's an interesting stat that this British researcher Warwick Carnes, he looked at abduction statistics, and he claims anyway that if you wanted your child to be abducted and you put them out on the street, you'd have to wait 600,000 years before that would happen. And if you want them killed, then it's up into the millions. So the world's actually fairly safe. So I'll just finish just with going through a little bit of what I'm doing specifically with young people, since that's one of the reasons why I'm here. So we have the Young Mammals, and that's the youth wing of the company in Toronto, but then starting in other places, and I'll talk about that. And then this way of working with, model of working with young people, I'm just calling the Mammalian Succession Model of youth labor engagement. I put the labor in there because it is really about community economic development and jobs, but I also put it in there because then it made it smile. I was going to leave it out. But again, I just want to point out that the utilization of like an acronym like that is purely artistic, and I have to say I feel kind of somewhat embarrassed about sort of codifying things. I just want to be clear that it's flexible, this idea of naming something like that. And I'll just sort of introduce the principles as we go. So the Torontonians are a group of young people that we started to work with in 2010. So we've done a bunch of projects like Haircuts by Children, Eat the Street. We've started those kinds of things. They all started in this neighborhood of Parkdale with this one school, this elementary school. And then in 2010, one of the students got in touch with me and wanted to know what else was going on. And nothing was going on at that point because we were touring stuff around too much. And so we formed this collective with this kid and started to do work with him and his friends. And that eventually evolved into this idea of secession. So that's the kind of the main principle behind the secession model of youth labor engagement, is that we're working with these guys with the idea that they're going to take over the company, and that's the main goal behind everything we do. We understand that most of them are not interested. I mean, these guys, now they're 20, but even we're proposing this when they were 14. They have no clue what they want. Most of them are not interested in a life in the arts or that kind of thing. There's computer engineers now, there's guys in life sciences, people in accounting. The accountant actually works for us now. She's an accounting student. But with that idea of secession in mind, then there's a completely different engagement with the youth. And then the thing that comes with secession is the idea of collegiality, that there are colleagues, so that the work we make with them is as important to our career as it is to them, or maybe even more so. So it's not something like the cool thing that they're doing that is off on the kind of the second stage where their parents come and see it, like that kind of stuff. It's more central to the company. So these are some of the projects that we've done specifically with this group of young people. So night walks with teenagers, a very basic piece again. Work with a bunch of teenagers and design a walk. With this, we make sure that the walk is not in any area that the young people are familiar with. So they have to be unfamiliar with the area, as well as an adult audience is likely to be unfamiliar with the area. We try to just sort of do a psychogeographic exploration with the young people. With this project, it was devised in collaboration with young people in Toronto. And the way I sort of think about collaborating with young people is that there's a good division of labor that sort of suggests itself naturally, where the young people are great at providing content just through their everyday interactions, like whatever they like to do, whatever impulses that they have. That is often the basis of good content. The problem is that they don't understand that as artistic form. They don't understand what kind of form would you put around that. So if we say that, so for example, in opposition to that, I've said to them many times in the early days, so what do you guys want to make work about? And they'll be like, bullying. And I'm like, who the fuck is interested in bullying? Are you actually interested in bullying? No, well, that's what they're talking about at school. I'm like, okay, forget it. So asking them outright wasn't all that productive because, and the forms that they will suggest, the artistic forms that they will suggest will will be informed by what they know, and they don't know that much. And so, but we know that much. We know that a urinal can be a piece of art. We know social practice. We know haircuts. We know things like that. And so, trying to frame what they do and provide a formal frame around it while maintaining whatever it is that is interested them about the thing to begin with. So, in this case, we used to go downtown and check out shows down there, which was an hour from where they live. And they always insisted on walking home, which really surprised me. Like on a Saturday or Friday night, that they would want to walk an hour home, going against the narrative about young people and laziness and preferring to just play on games on their phone or whatever. This was very different than what I expected, and so it was like watching that. I'm going, okay, you guys love walking at night. And also they loved. When I talked to them about it, what they really liked was that they could do this thing that was like right on the edge of adulthood. They're like 14, 15 years old. Something that's like autonomous, yet me and the other adults that are partaking this thing are there as backup, and so they feel super safe, and we're not telling them to climb down off of things or anything like that. So they had this really sort of nice environment to do it, and the interaction between the adults was always what thrilled them. Even the adults lining up at the bar, lining up for a bar or for a nightclub, and we would walk through the nightclub district, and they would have interactions with these people, and it was thrilling for them. So this project kind of does that on purpose. It brings together people. We do things like go through abandoned buildings and places like that. Go to places that we're not supposed to go. Clearly, went up there and managed to break onto this. This is actually a roof of a mall that we managed to literally use a water bottle to open a gate that we shouldn't have. So a little bit, taking a few risks, nothing major. And then one thing that really works, so what I'll do is I'll keep an eye on them during the preparation for this. So as we're walking around everywhere that we're going, I'm keeping an eye on who does what. So who climbs up a thing that they should climb up, or who, I don't even know what. Like in this case, who took this syringe full of water and squirted it at me. So that was during a preparation period. So I'm like, okay, well that's now a performance. This is the squirting performance. So we'll get everybody some water pistols and we'll have a squirting performance. So keeping an eye on what they do that they just like to do, and then calling it performance. So with this worked really, really well, and we've done it again, and it's so reliable. What happens if you have a bunch of teenagers who relentlessly squirt water into adults' faces? What happens is the adults lose their shit. They really lose it, but they lose it in a way that is totally cool, in a way that the way that a 16-year-old might lose it, where they are in total control of themselves, but they want revenge. And see, this guy, he broke that water pistol, and then there was another, it happened again. It was like clockwork. She was the director of the festival, middle-aged woman, probably almost 60, and she totally lost it and attacked them, but attacked them in a fully play fight kind of way. And it was really hilarious to see, and eventually they'll just kind of give up and lose their will to live. So we'll find things like that, and that's one, if I can, every time we do the project, we'll do it in a different place with different youth. Except with this, the deal with this project is because it came from the Torontonians, and some of them have to be there to realize it. Usually we have two that travel with us to realize it. Over the course of the last bunch of years, we've had 19 of them come and help co-realize projects in Europe with us in the summer. A bunch more will be coming to the project. So that's in Bristol. Sometimes the audience can be quite huge. In Bristol, it was about 100, and there was a little bit of a kid sort of suddenly spontaneously did a really complex 10-minute performance, spontaneously serious. So that's the kind of thing we'll tour. And then Darrenite is another one of the projects that come from the youth in particular, where they just devised a bunch of dares. They got dressed up in suits, and so he was about 6. Sanjay, he's the kid who got a hold of me at first, and we just present dares to the adults, things like the old tap out of the nose, of course, licking the armpits, of course, generation appropriate armpit licking. We don't get any intergenerational armpit licking. We know what we're doing. Don't worry about it. Darren Lockdown was just the same thing, only it culminated a year of learning how to produce events. That was the first actual program that we forced onto them. All of the stuff we've been doing up to that point for the first couple of years of this Torontonians was just whenever I would get a call to present something or just be on a panel or anything in Toronto, it would have to involve them. And then rather than teach them acting or I don't know what else, any kind of artistic skill, the first skill we taught them was how to be producers and how to produce an event. The reason why that is because I didn't want them, anybody who's actually interested in the arts and culture, if they get, generally people who are trained as artists don't really get much of like a logistics and a business and kind of that kind of training, so felt that was important to do first off, and then also the skills are easily transferable, so they could plan their wedding with the skills if they didn't want to use it, and they didn't want to be art makers or involved in what we were doing, they could transfer these skills to other spots. So, that's not supposed to be there. So stuff like that, typical Darrenites, tape on the nipples, some dancing, and then they crashed and they slept there over the night. So yeah, I'll just finish with, this is the last Torontonians project that is a little bit involved, and then I'll introduce the two other projects that we have internationally, and then wrap that up. So this is Toronto. It's income divide, very low income where the suburbs are, very high income where there's subway, beach, shopping, river. So that's where all of the relatively affluent people, and it's Toronto, so there's lots of very, very affluent people. And so we did a project working with the kids, and we live here, right there. So it's low income. It's mostly traditionally been a landing pad for immigrants, but it's now being gentrified and turned into, that's where all of that's kind of gallery district is down there. So it's been part of the initiative, the thinking behind this was that, so we have this really interesting population of all of these kids who are first generation immigrants, most of them Asian immigrants, Sri Lankan, Indian, Filipino, Vietnamese, Chinese, and then we have all these predominantly white artsy fartsters also in the neighborhood, also both populations at risk of being gentrified out. So there was natural sort of alliance, I thought, and so through doing all of this work, that was kind of one of the motors behind it. And we did this one project called Promises to a Divided City, where we worked with kids from the burbs, who we met over the course of a few years. And what we did was we just presented how the socioeconomic situation in the city has evolved since 1970. And we did very physical demonstrations of that. So we had audience cohorts of 20, so spent all day doing the show with 20 people at a time, and we would set them up. So this is high income, medium income, low income, and then you could see the percentage, how the ratios were in 1970, how they were in 75, and then, I mean, what you saw was the middle class, of course, evaporate. So really physically demonstrating that kind of stuff. And then what we did was we had surveyed them at the beginning and got a bunch of their economic data from them, how much they make, if they own a house. So we had all of this, and then we had a friend of mine who's a programmer made it so that we could really quickly just turn these into percentiles through some formula that we devised together. And so what we did was, as people came in, we had Jennifer, who you can see there. So Jennifer would just use a very simple algorithm to throw them against the wall, ranging from low income to high income. And the algorithm was very basic. If you're a young black male, you're going to be down where the poor guys are. If you're, a middle-aged white guy, you'll be up there, and sort of do a gradation. So we did that just using this. That's Jennifer guessing, and then we would say, and here's the real data. And then we would rearrange people according to the information that they had provided for us. It was very stressful for people, as you can imagine. As we're doing that, we're also talking about the actual health effects of inequity and what inequity actually does to your cortisol levels, and just all of the research that shows that a wealthy, inequitable country like the States is going to have a lot more people unhealthy than a country that is less wealthy, but is more equality between people. So we stressed them out like that for a bit, and just asked them to note what was going on in their bodies as they were experiencing that. Kind of weren't so nice to them through that moment, and then we chilled them out and laid them down on these cots, and the kids from the burbs told them stories about life in the burbs and just quotidian, everyday kind of stuff. And then we got them to make the audience make a promise to visit a business. We gave them a list of various things that they could do to connect up with the inner suburbs, youth arts organizations if they want to go see a show. We just gave them a list of things to do, and we asked them to do it within a year, and just that's their promise to the divided city. Okay, I'll just finish with this one with the Torontonians. So, oh yeah, do you recognize that guy? Yeah, he's the guy who's getting his haircut. So we brought him back. That's just another promotion still for, it's a video project that we did. And this is another example of content, youth content in adult form. So I spent a lot of time with these guys, these 14-year-old guys, and one time we went out for Vietnamese food, and it was just me and boys. And so we got into this conversation that I just started to call high school health, because we would sometimes have this style of conversation where they wanted to know things like what if I pee when I'm inside her? You know, like basic sex ed questions. Some questions that were really funny, like just this wrestling with the idea of, okay, uncircumcised means there's something there, right? Like a very confusion about what's the why is that if there's foreskin is there? All right, here, let me break it down. So it was really fun answering all these questions, and I just noticed the degree to which I felt like I really have to answer this question as accurately as I could, and help out. And so what I did was I found a bunch of, we did a video shoot with as famous Canadians as would agree to do this, to subject themselves to any question this panel wanted to ask them about their sex life. So that's Dan Hill, who wrote a song. He was like the Justin Bieber of 1977. He wrote "Sometimes When We Touch." You know that song? Yeah. So he was huge. So they got to talk about what it was like on the road as a 23-year-old, how much booty was available when he had his hit, and then how that dried up in 3 years, and the effects of that on his psyche. And getting a woman pregnant, he was able to talk about like the idea of the whatever withdrawal method and how stupid that is. You can tell young people that it's stupid, but having him talk about having to bring his girlfriend and having to go across the border to the States, to Buffalo, to get an abortion, like in 1972, like just the kind of chills that went down these guys' spines was that was much more effective than sort of talking about those kinds of things theoretically. And that's Adam McGoyan, who's she's a filmmaker, kind of the schmancy filmmaker we have, and he talked openly about some strange relationships that he had with when he was a teenager, and this girl he was dating who was in whose father seemed to be somewhat abusive, and so it got kind of interesting and kind of dark, and we made them into these short 15-minute kind of like after-school special things, but clearly a different kind of subject matter. And that's Anne-Marie McDonald, who's an author and a broadcaster as well. So I'll just wrap up with two bigger projects. One is called Mit ohne alles, and so Mit ohne alles means without everything. So if you're ordering a burger and you want nothing on the burger, you say without everything. Is that right? Yeah? That's interesting? Yeah? Good. So the young people we've been working with at the Rotary now, which is a festival in, it's a large festival, it's a 7-week festival in this post-industrial area in Germany. There was a culture capital in 2000. And what they've done is they've turned all of these massive like coal factories, steel manufacturing factories, and turned them into opera houses. And so we're kind of the youth engagement kind of wing of it since 2012, where we did the Children's Choice Awards, and then we spun off this collective like we have in Toronto. It's a group of young people that are probably the average age was around 16. And this summer, what we did was we took them, and those kids are mostly the children of guest workers. So guest workers was this program where people were brought from Eastern Europe and Turkey. They weren't given citizenship for a long time, but they had kids and they had families and they lived their lives. They've been allowed to be citizens more recently, but we worked with their kids, and then we brought together them with a bunch of immigrants and refugees who were recently arrived. And then what we did, we dragged everybody out camping for 3 weekends. I should introduce, that's Konstantin Bach, who co-directed All the Sex with Me. He started working with us when he was 18 years old. He was an intern who came and picked me up at the train station, and now he co-directs one of our main projects. He actually directs it. He pushed me out of the way. It hurt so much. I can't tell you how much that hurt. And getting used to him being way better than me and way faster than me, oh gosh. So what we did was we took these kids camping, and just 3 weekends of camping with the question, can we find embrace? The leitmotif, the theme of the festival that last year was Sei umschlungen, which means be embraced, and it's from Schiller's Ode to Joy, which is the anthem for Europe, and the entire line is Sei umschlungen. Do you know it by any chance? It's Sei umschlungen, be embraced, you millions. I'm not sure how you say it in German, but so be embraced, you millions is sentiment behind it. And so we were like, can we find embrace? If we bring all these kids together, and what will embrace look like? Will they embrace each other? Will these kids from all of these different countries? And there we did have some kids from Syria. She's Roma, so from I'm not sure where, Hungary, maybe. And I don't know if you're Roma. Roma are relatively stateless, kind of, and nobody really likes them, and nobody wants them around. So we brought these kids together, did a bunch of camping, and then just basically reported on what we found. Did we find embrace, and how did we find embrace? And so you can see all 40 of us. It was a bit of a chaotic show, all 40 of us, and trying to find a moment for every young person to come and sort of state to what extent and represent their embrace in some way. Didn't have very much time for it, so we sort of banged through it really, really quickly. It was not ideal, but it looked good, and that's mostly because of Constantine. But it was a show with these guys, and it's that kind of that form that I'm looking to reproduce with the Gambian guys. Something that will maybe look sort of like this. That'll have this kind of aesthetic framing where you feel you're at something, and then we're not doing something too terribly theatrical. We're not putting on a crazy show. We're mostly just reporting on our findings when we went camping and tried to find embrace, or when we went to try to figure out how these guys can become German, more German citizens, or better Germans, or the Germans that they want to be, I guess is probably the best. And the final thing is what we're doing in Tottenham, in London, is in the neighborhood in 2011, there was a bunch of riots that started in Tottenham and then spread across the whole country. Started because a young black father was shot and killed by the cops, and so the community reacted to that. And so we're there working with a group of kids who are 12 years old, and we're working with 9 artists that live in that neighborhood. So we managed to find, and it's kind of an obscure neighborhood. It would be like equivalent to, I guess, like further east where. And it's hard. London is quite different, but it still feels like a city, but it's still it's underserviced, and and so it's deprived is what they like to call it. So we're working with a group of kids there for the next at least 5 years with 9 local artists, realizing projects with them, trying to duplicate what we did in Toronto, what would take 10 years to do, which was work with them with the school, peel them off from the school, and then this idea of secession and sharing our resources. With them, sharing the company with them, and seeing if they can sort of assume responsibility in the company. I should also mention that the most important part about all of this is that it's really targeted at populations of young people who are not white. Just because the cultural industries remains ridiculously white, I think that there are problems that are beyond any individual. Any individual, there's systemic problems, obviously. But I think that one of the kind of answers we have to that is sharing knowledge in a much more ambient way, so that the young people are steeped in this, so that we kind of operate as like cultural uncles and aunts to these kids, and are sharing everything we know and sharing our cultural capital with them, and not formally, because if you do it formally and sit down and say this is this gallery, that is that museum, it just doesn't stick. We try to like be with them as friends, and that's what we've been doing in Toronto, and we're seeing what aspects are replicable everywhere else, and that's the lens through which I'm viewing what's happening here, and are some of these principles possible. I mean, there's challenges, obviously, because it involves a lot of adult time, like the ratio of time, the ratio of social time even to production of artwork is like, we're 70% of the time we're socializing, and then 30% of the time we're making work, and sometimes that's not feasible. So those are the things that we're kind of doing all over the place. Yeah, so I don't know, if you have questions or comments or anything to chat.
What are you doing here?
So I'm here.
I'm just like excited.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, so I'm here for the I'm here for the year. We've got some money from a foundation called the Doris Duke Foundation to understand, for just to take a look at the youth arts landscape in Portland. First of all, what are people already doing, and then how might PICA work with that in a supportive way? What would be the best role for PICA within the youth arts ecology here? And then again, what aspects of the stuff that I'm doing elsewhere can maybe be applied here?
If you don't mind asking, I'm curious how you support yourself just because of the salary is flat.
Sure, like how do I get by on that little money? Oh, I don't spend money on anything. I mean, I'm mostly traveling. I've never felt anything but like that I have lots of money. So I don't spend any. That's how. But and the other thing is I expect that I'll die quite like suddenly. So the idea of making sure that I'm like a retirement seems preposterous, and I'm not worrying about that. And so that I'm not sort of putting that away. I'm not sure. I don't even know what other people do with their money or how money works for the most part. I just know that I don't spend very much, and I just sort of get by. My colleagues are not happy about how much we make. Yeah.
Are you fully supported by this project, or do you have a side job?
I don't have a side job. No. This is it. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I'll like talks and things like that. Sometimes I'll get a little bit of extra money, but I don't make much more than that. Maybe I mean, it's probably going to start to approach there's like 50 or maybe 40 of your money, 40,000 sometime soon. I don't have any kids. That really helps, obviously. Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah. And I would consider that, not like I made a sacrifice, but it was definitely a choice to focus fully on that, and then all of these other things fell away, children fell away, homeownership fell away, but I'm not so worried about that. I showed the guys from Gambia that slide. They didn't think like you, they thought very differently.
How do you think about it?
How do I think about what?
And how do you think about entering into, I guess, like, what sort of ethics in mind you have as an approach?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends, because there's a whole range of stuff we do. Haircuts is kind of, I would call that a parachute project, where in the community arts world, it's kind of a swear word where you just parachute in, you do something, and then you're out. But with that one, I think the offer is so delineated. It's not like we're, if we did that and we're there for 3 months and then we disappeared without saying another word, that might stress people out. But we're there, it's so fun and so fast and it's so fun that there's not much to worry about with that. With the other stuff, I mean, we are trying to, we call them mammalian droppings. We're trying to leave behind activities and people who can lead activities. So that's what's happened in Germany. We're sort of growing this sort of collective of people and adults who are part of the festival, who are affiliated with the festival, who now also are just volunteering to do stuff and hang around with the young people and continue it. So we try as much as possible to leave ideas in people who continue, both as a strategy, both ethically, but then also as a strategy for company growth. Just like, let's keep on staying connected with these kids and see who wants to work with us in the future. But it's both ways. Yeah.
In the project that you said the two goals are sort of like to get the kids to learn how to become more driven, or through two different routes.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as to like how that goal was sort of set up, and sort of a larger question: how do you pursue these ideas and get these projects started?
Well, so those guys aren't kids. They're probably 20 to 30 years old. Gambian refugees. With those guys, it was I proposed something that was kind of related to that, just in order to get a chunk of funding to go do a bunch of research. So I lived with them, slept in a room with 3 of those guys over the course of August, and just talked to them and started to figure out just what might they want. And when I say to be German, I just mean they're trying to become German citizens. That's what they want. And so what will make them feel the most happy and comfortable that they think. And they have lots of people who are supporting them, so I'm working with them too. But the idea just comes from listening and being with them and seeing. That one's so simple, it's just like directly, what do these guys want? And let's facilitate that, and then I step in mostly with the kind of form of how do we present this in a way that people will want to buy it, people want to spend money on these guys to tour them around the country so that they can make some money, so we can share these methods. So that's what I come in. But for the most part, at this point, it's just trying to help them out. Yeah.
Do you ever feel awkward?
Yeah, totally, all the time. Yeah, constantly. I have a. Do you know what Aspire is? No, it's this thing. It's this thing that's monitoring my breath, and I've been tense and awkward all day long. But it tells me when I'm in a focus state and when I'm in a calm state. It's super amazing, and it's super accurate. If you want to look at it, it's like the data's on my phone. If you want to look at it, so I've been tense all day. Thanks for asking. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I'm curious about like your team of people in all these different stages. Like how many people and who to get something.
I'm in a
ready?
calm streak. I just want to point that out. I'm calm right now. So, yeah. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
How many people to start developing an idea to connect with the community, to tour a show after it's made? Who's involved?
Yeah, so the company is me, Eva Verte, who is the shorter woman on that side. She's the director of creative productions, and that's her title. And what her role is she does all the negotiations with presenters, like people who want to purchase the work. Like mostly it's festivals. Sometimes it's galleries, but we're kind of come from the theater world, so we have this festival circuit. Like TBA is kind of the most visual arty of the festivals that we're in. And so there's her, and then Jenna deals with company management. Sometimes really tedious stuff like just hiring policy, non-discrimination policy, writing that kind of stuff, and then payroll and that kind of stuff. So that's sort of normally humming along. And then when we work in another place, we'll generally have, generally there's at least one person who's assigned directly to us, who's the local coordinator, and then they will have, it depends on the project, but they might have a couple team members that are there, and almost inevitably, those guys will be part of whatever education outreach department a given festival or gallery would have. That's where, and that's a kind of interesting thing. The niche spot that we've been able to find is that a lot of these education outreach departments, they have some money, but they rarely do projects that are considered art or good performance. So they just they'll do outreach stuff, and they'll work with youth and introduce the youth to the work that's going on in the festival, but those youth will never present anything. But we found a way to make work with these wings so that they can have a presence on the stages. So it's working well for us, because not too many people do that kind of thing in particular. So there's a crew on that side, and then there's a crew on our side, and it's relatively small, or maybe that's big. It feels small because people are busy. Yeah.
If you're here for a year to work with things here, are you like targeting a certain age or demographic, or are you trying to do one type of project, or are you like what is?
So the age is teenagers. So we're looking at 13 to 18, 19, and again looking to see what young people who are not white are up to, what youth of color are doing, and to see to what extent can we, that as being the primary question, and then in general what's happening with the youth arts landscape in general, but how can that particular population find this place more accessible, or just work with us more, and then also can those who are interested in this as a field, how can we facilitate that just so that we can start to budge this really idiotic problem we have. Yeah?
It's not a very tight question, but I guess I'm curious if the balance between spontaneity and these sorts of things versus structure. Like maybe you don't need to go for grants because you have funding coming through for projects eventually, but it seems like sometimes people struggle with grants for these kinds of open projects because they want these really defined things, and you're saying like, no, we're going to figure it out as we go. So how do you kind of bridge those two as you navigate?
Mostly we lie.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly we totally lie. Constantly. Every grant is a lie. It's the best lie that we can manage at that moment, but we know that we might well just jettison this entire thing. And it depends on like a long-term funding, so like a 3-year funding to hire a director of the Young Mammals, which we had a few years ago. Like that had to be very specific, and there were very specific deliverables. So there's those things, but then on the project things, it can be pretty loose. And we do have to go for funding. We get a lot of touring funding is what we have to go for, and there's funding. But line is one thing, and then the other thing I think that's important is that often, like with something like haircuts, and this is also in terms of spontaneity, facilitating the spontaneity of the young people, is that the parameters of the haircuts project are so rigid in some ways, right? Like they're just running a salon and they're cutting hair. Like there's not very many, they don't have a whole range of options, the young people. So there's some projects that have intense rigidity, and that within that the kids have a lot of fun and run it the way they want to run it and do the crazy haircuts they want to do. But there's a rigidity. I was just in, excuse me, Lisa Jarrett's, who's back there, was at her PSU social practice class, and they've got a really, really interesting and incredibly rigid project that has, the rigidity is hilarious, where, can I explain it? Okay, so what they've got is, and I may not get this right, they have a bunch of artwork that's just photographs of artwork that is, where is it from? The MoMA? Oh, it is.
It's called
Not MoMA. Who's Stephanie?
Stephanie's an artist, she works at UC.
Oh, is she here? I thought you were pointing.
Oh, no, she's not here.
Okay.
She's here.
Okay.
She's not here.
Okay. So so they have instructions, and these instructions are for the young people. The kids will look at a bunch of, who chooses the photographs that they look at first?
The PSU, they're sort of senior collaborators, so the kids from PSU
Okay.
start with the selection and create images, and then the students create out of that. The students from King School,
Right.
you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's PSU students. The PSU students are going to these grade 3 students at King School. The PSU students have chosen a bunch of art from MoMA's collection. They show the kids that art. The kids choose which piece that they want to reproduce, the little kids, and then basically what seems to be happening is that the adults are they're basically, the kids are the adult's client, like the adults are their fabrication team, and they work with these kids, and so they have to reproduce the original piece, but in collaboration with these kids. And so just watching, when I say kids, I mean the little kids, the PSU students, watching them is really, really funny because they're super stressed out about this, I think, in a good way. And Lisa said something really funny, which is perfect, which is really, I think, encapsulates what I think kids are great for when they're working with adults. She said to them, if you fail at this project, she's telling her students, you will make somebody cry, right? And so just adults really step up, and that's what I like about the presence of children is that, I mean, even adults' behavior towards each other, you're generally try to be on, you don't want to scream at somebody in front of a kid. So I just like the way the presence of children makes adults kind of respond in as ethically and good as they can. So I'm curious to see how this plays out, but it'll be really interesting. Should we call it? Yeah! Remember your bracelet. Is Lucy still here? Okay. And if you really, I have a few, it's just like information things that we made that are, it's kind of a poster, it's also a, I don't know what you call them, a cootie catcher. So if you want one of these, I only have a few of them, so if you're super passionate, come and grab one, and if not, don't. Thanks a lot.